So to recap what we've done, we've created a trainer app. Excuse me. And we created endpoints to sign up, to log in, to log out, and to do a bunch of other good stuff. Most of the magic was in the Django settings config. That is all stepped through in the curriculum doc for today. However, if someone wants to put together maybe a sort of a checklist for that, I could see that actually being a really good resource for the class. And if someone does want to do that, we could also demo that tomorrow. And then we saw that once we set up Django REST framework to use token authentication, it does so much of the work for us with this abstract user class. And that this is a model that gets inherited by trainer. And once we kind of tell Django, hey, we're using the email as the username, I want you to use token authentication, this does most of the work for us. And our API views become very, very straightforward. And this was, I had some test data there. And we might come back to that, so I'll leave it kind of hovering around there. But getting information about an authenticated user becomes really simple. Getting logout information about or having a user log out becomes very simple. And logging in is also relatively straightforward as well. And we saw a little bit about the flow that's happening here, where we have signing in or logging up. We pass a username and password. Django then hashes the password if we're signing in and we already have an account, and gets a separate authentication token. And remember, we kind of poked around a little in the database, but just to reiterate, we saw that once we enabled Django REST framework's auth token module, we actually needed to run a migration that created this table, auth token. And this is actually where the auth tokens live. And when I log out, the auth token is deleted. There might be an automatic behavior that sort of deletes a token after a certain amount of time, and that's how it would expire. And we also saw that separate from this, in our trainer app trainer table, which is where all the user information now lives, we store hashed passwords, which are not the same as the token. And this is how we practice some good security, and we don't have plain text passwords in our database. We can still use a hashing function to do that. So now what we really need to see is how do we use this on our front end with Axios? I'll come back over here so we can see if things pop up as we go. So let's pop back over to our front end code and talk about what we want to do. So the front end app, we've got this routing, app loads, right? I click on, and let's actually put these side by side. I'm at my home page. I click on Pokemon. And then what happens is that takes me over from the app component, and React Router takes us into the Pokemon page. And this is where things get interesting, because this is where we make the HTTP request to get all the Pokemon. And we haven't set up authentication on these routes yet. And so we're not having any problems with like token authentication, but that's what we're going to do. So what we kind of have to do is lay the groundwork so that once our front end gets the auth token, we use it all the time. And we'll see kind of what the flow for signing up and logging in looks like a bit later. But what we're going to start with is first, let's use this auth token once we get it. What we've also seen is, like, if I look at this code and I do a global search for, HTTP 127.0.0.1. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different calls now on port 8000 in our front end code, right? And we can kind of see we're probably getting an individual Pokemon. This put is for updating a Pokemon. This delete is to delete a Pokemon. Here we're getting moves. We're getting all the Pokemon here probably, and then this is to create a new Pokemon. So this is also a good time to do a little bit of like consolidation of logic and of not duplicating this sort of string all over the place. And let's actually start with that. And we can use this with Axios too, because now our HTTP requests need a little bit more setup. So what I want to do is in my front end code, under source, I'm just going to make a file named utilities. It's not a component. It's not going to render anything. It's not a page, right? Which is our big components. So it's just going to go right under source. I believe we could also just name this JS if we want, and that's not uncommon because sometimes to help us see this isn't a React component. But both ways work, and sometimes you do run into a little funniness with Vite Dev Server. So for now, I'm just going to leave it JSX, and I'm just going to put HTTP utilities and such. And we'll come back to the browser in a minute. But let's see what we're going to do here. This is going to help us use Axios. So let's import Axios. And we're going to create a little wrapper. And what we're really doing is like creating a little HTTP client for ourselves. Right? We're not going to call Axios directly because we want to do a couple extra things with it. And Axios has this nice method create that we can use to do this. And this is what we're going to export, right? So we'll look at what Axios create does in just a sec. And we pass Axios.create a JavaScript object, and each property on this object is basically configuration information. Base URL is a very, very common term. You've heard me say like host, domain. This is our base, right? Localhost 5173. Or for those AJAX requests, IP address 127.0.0.1, port 8000, right? Because everything else on the URL builds off of that. So that is the base. And eventually, we're not going to do this today, but you can actually put this in an environment variable file for your front end. And that's kind of a nifty feature add that's a nice thing to add to a personal project. And if we take a quick look at this Axios create method, we see it's returning an Axios instance is what it says. I don't know exactly what that is, but it's telling me, okay, cool, I can do stuff with Axios. And if we do a quick Google, we can get a little more information. And really, this is all I need. This is sort of my level 1 research process. Cool, we get a new instance of Axios with a custom config, the base URL, and is this font size good for everyone, by the way? Perfect. This is going to be helpful already, so we don't have to type this all the time. And headers, this looks awfully useful. And in fact, we're going to use this in a moment for our authorization header. And then we can see we have all the same methods, the instance methods that we did before of get, put, delete, so on and so forth. So we can use this little API sort of wrapper or Axios instance the exact same way we were before. And in fact, if I want to test that out, let's just quickly go to Pokemon JSX. Let's import this from our utilities. So let's import API from I want to say it's // utilities. And right here where we get all the Pokemon, instead of Axios.get, let's do API.get. And now, like, this is gonna fail because we need to change this URL because it's like adding this in again. But just for fun to see what that looks like, let's take a very quick look. So if I refresh somewhere in here, let's maybe filter. Here we go. This one looks like no, that actually seemed to work. Maybe I put it in the wrong spot. Let's see what's going on. Get all Pokemon. Maybe I need to hard refresh. Let's find out just to make sure I haven't missed something that we'll run into like a minute or two down the line when using this. Let me make sure I'm running off of the right dev server. That's always an easy mistake to make. I wonder if Axios is trying to do something clever, because I would have expected like a request that was way too long. And I do see all these other ones failing. And that's the noun, just the noun API having an issue. The other way to test this is we can just remove the base URL from our request and see if it still works. And then we'll probably get useful information if there is a syntax error, a typo that I have somewhere. And now we're getting all these something went wrong alerts. And actually, I do want to, I think, get rid of those just for dev purposes, to be honest. And we'll just knock out a couple of these. And let's go ahead and finish updating in this URL, getting rid of the base. Right. If we really wanted, we could maybe even add API/v1 or API to our base. But we don't have to do that now. Though actually API might be nice to add. Leaving v1 in here isn't the worst, because maybe we'll have a version 2 of our API that we're using at some point. So let's see if this works. And let me kill and restart the dev server and do a hard refresh. And it does seem to be working. So I wonder if maybe Axios kind of does something clever. And let's actually maybe do just a quick sanity check. So there's my two utilities files. And yeah, I think everything is working fine. And I think Axios maybe just was a little smarter than I realized and kind of saw that the base was in there, because it sure looks like we're using it in our source code. And the nice thing about sources is now I can see exactly what's here in the browser, because sometimes, you know, like because of caching, sometimes an old version of the JavaScript is used. So I'm not sure exactly what was going on there, but it seems like we're in good shape. So now that we kind of have this set up, we really want to get a token. and we need some sort of registration page. Because once we have the token, we can just use it right here. So I'm going to make a new page for registering. And we're going to use, instead of Axios, this little API wrapper that we just wrote. And I'm going to open up the Pokemon page as my guide code and copy all the other things that I want to use here, right? We're going to probably want use effect. We might use row. We'll see if we need any of that other stuff at the moment. But this is a pretty good start. We are probably going to want use navigate from React Router. So let's import that as well. And let me make sure I have a correct import there. And we're going to need some sign-up logic. We're going to use navigate in a minute. We're going to need a bunch of stuff that we're going to want to add. But let's just build like a really simple registration page. Just so we can start seeing something on the screen, and then we can start adding all of these things in. And we'll probably just put this right on the home page. So kind of like the create Pokemon component, it's not going to look pretty, but it's going to do what we want and get the job done. And so I'm probably going to borrow this bootstrap row because we're probably going to want that as well. And we're going to return some stuff. And again, I'm honestly going to borrow stuff from my other code. And I'm just going to borrow this right here. And again, this is like once you get like one or two good, kind of patterns set up that you can reuse, it makes life a lot easier. And we'll put an H2 in there that says just create on counts. We'll worry kind of a bit later about hooking up the input fields and all that stuff. But again, just to have something to see on the screen. We'll do email, and we're just gonna console log it, and we're gonna have password. And now I've got what it is a really, really simple registration page, right? And in fact, let's go ahead and we probably want to add this to our routing so we can go there and do stuff with it. So and I'll rename this register to follow sort of our syntax, and let's export default. Yeah, and we won't do a default export actually, just to follow the syntax and the sort of the pattern of the rest of our code. I'm not going to kind of worry too much about renaming that file. I think I will do this so that I have enough internal consistency. And now let's go ahead and use this component. And the last thing we'll want to do is on the homepage, add a link to it. Or excuse me, in our navbar, rather, add a link to it. And let's put it right after the homepage. And I want to make sure that I got my route right. And it does indeed look right. So now with fingers crossed, I've got register, I've got create an account, email, password. We can fill in the rest later, right? There's no form element, there's no button, it's not hooked up to any state, but at least we can see some stuff. And I know that the component renders, and I want to implement now our sign up logic and flow, and we'll just sort of hard code the data in, and kind of hooking it up to the user interface can be the last step. So we're going to want to use the use navigate hook, because we're going to want to navigate to the home page once we're done, but we'll get there in a little bit. I think what I do want to do is let's actually go ahead and hook this up because we're almost there. And let's just do, actually, in fact, I'm going to go back to my Pokemon guide code and again, just start copying and pasting. And again, the rule with copy and paste is do it intentionally and think about what bits you have to change and make sure you understand the code that you're moving around, right? And the fact that I'm copying and pasting my own code makes it way easier than someone else's. Even with my own code, you know, there's a chance of typos or missing things and stuff like that. And we know this is going to be an asynchronous function. And we know from the other day when I forgot to do event default that we're going to want to do that right here because it's coming from a form. So now we've kind of got this stuff built up. And we might as well just take it home here and add our bit of state to actually get data from these form fields. And we also want to add our button. So let's do email set email. And it'll be an empty string. And we're going to do the same thing for password. And now what we can do here is instead of a console log, we can set our email. And over here, instead of a console log, we can set our password. And let's add that input button to the submit input. I believe it is type submit. There is also a email field type that we can use for this, and I'm not going to worry about that right now for the input field. And input value, let's maybe put sign up in there. Or we'll put create because we are creating a new user account. So now I've got an input field, this button, I've got a bit of state. I want to go back to my app, see that the button's there. I want to go to components. And I'm unsure something for some reason. There we go. Now React DevTools is working. I'm going to use this select because there's so many nested things here and find the bit that I care about. Or just kind of, I'm going to just go down here till I find it. And it's the register page. And we'll give it a minute. And now I just want to make sure that I properly hooked up my state. And now I know for sure that I wrote all that logic right. And that's really nice because again, now I have a much stronger guarantee as I'm implementing the newer stuff. So we've got this endpoint that we wrote. And in fact, we just did it in Thunder Client earlier. And so there's definitely a way to save stuff in Thunder Client. And it's probably a good time to look into it because it's getting more and more useful to have these. Also, the requests REST API extension and just saving stuff in .http files can be useful as well. And that maybe is a little better in terms of documentation because then you can have those as a reference. But remember, we did /user/signup and we put the stuff that we wanted in the body. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Right. So again, it's like we are learning these pieces and we're just reusing these pieces that we learn. And the more that you can get in the habit of using your own code and other code as like guide and documentation and reference, I think the more helpful it is because these projects are getting bigger, but we just kind of break them into little steps and make sure that stuff works before moving forward. And now instead of Axios, we just do API.post. And we should be able to just do users / and it looks like I may have used sign up instead of register and veered a little bit from what was in the curriculum. So I'm just going to go to my URLs py to the trainer app and double check. And indeed I did. So either one is fine. We just want to make sure that we're consistent. And I want that / at the end. And now I need to put some stuff in here, right? I need to pass in a username and password. So I'm going to pass in a JavaScript object. And the email is just going to be my email field. So in fact, I can just do this, or I could do this. Or if instead of email, I named that bit of state username, I could do that. And password. Right. And now we've got our response. I wouldn't mind adding a little bit of like a catch here for error stuff. So I think I might do that right now. So I'm going to do just a tiny refactor here. And we're just going to do const data equals email password. And over here, instead of putting the object in there, I'm going to do it like that. And the reason I wanted to do that is because this is sort of the pattern that I'm used to for doing Axios requests and stuff. So I'm just going to do like console log and then a template error. And we're just going to say sign up error and $ error, right? Because chances are I will have a typo or something, and now I can get that error message in there. And we're using async await, so I don't need to like do promise chaining to deal with the results and stuff. And let's go ahead and get our user and our token. And remember, this is going to be an email. That was kind of how we wrote the endpoint. If we take a look in our trainer app and we look at the sign up, we send back trainer and we send back the token. So in fact, I need to make a minor modification here because there is not going to be any response.data.user. I think it's going to be an email and a token, or and really the name is going to be trainer. So, if I wanted to, maybe it's time to change this to email or whatever I want to do to keep everything in sync, but that's a little outside scope for right now. And there's always work like that to be done. But we've got, and in fact, I'm gonna indicate that here by naming this variable to be a bit more precise. And then I'm gonna grab the password, or excuse me, not the password, the token, which is way more important. And the next step is going to be to run this and see if it works. And then I think that's a good time to check in and see what questions people have and stuff, and then finish hooking this up. So I'm just going to do a console log, say sign up success. Email and token. And this way, it should be pretty easy to figure out if we did things right or not. So now is about the time to run this. Though actually I have to fire this off. So I think what I'm just going to do, just because we're hard coding right now, this is not, let's actually just do a use effect. And inside that use effect, let's do sign up. And what I'm going to do to cheat just a little bit, because we haven't actually put that data in there, because I just want to test that this works. Let's just do carol@gmail.com. We're just going to hard code this in the state and XYZ123. Right. So now when I go to my browser, we go to the register page, the component mounts and renders, the use effect fires. We've got default component state values. So then the use effect fires calls sign up, and it will do its thing, make the post request. And if everything works, we'll get this console log. And then once I know that's working, I'll actually, test it out with these input fields and stuff. But it's kind of nice to hard code, I think, when prototyping. So let me just pause and check in and see if folks have any questions before I run this and see, what typos or syntax issues there are. And let me catch up on the chat as well. Okay.
Yeah, there's probably nothing important in the chat.
All right, let's do this and see what happens. And this looks like all the other stuff. So yeah, all this stuff we can just ignore. The reason we're getting this error is because there is no event, because it's not hooked up to the form yet. So in fact, I may just go to a line 11 and comment that out and come back to it. And I could have used the form. I mean, we know it's working, to be honest, but this is in some ways a little faster. Like if I need to do a couple rounds of bug fixing, I can just do this very quickly. So let's go to the home page. What I'm also going to do is my normal routine of in the terminal clearing all these messages so we can get useful data. And let's just put this over here. I'll put that off to the side, and we'll put this over here. And we're going to want to probably open the network tab as well. And now the moment of truth is when we click on register. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is the post request was made. It went to our work with Axios and sort of that little API wrapper and the base seems to have worked fine, because that base is right there. And it did go to API/users/sign up. The bad news is that route's not found. My guess is maybe it's user instead of users.
I think you're missing the V1.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. In fact, yeah, I'm missing the V1. Thank you so much. I am gonna forget the V1 pretty much every time. I can just give you all a heads up now, so please keep reminding me. I really appreciate it. I would probably put the V1 in the base because it's gonna be at the beginning of everything, but that's a little bit of dealer's choice. And I know it's useful to kind of have the code stay in sync, so I don't want to add too many variations. And now this happened again, and actually it seemed to have succeeded. Let's see what's in our response. Yeah, so this happened again, and it worked. We can see here the first two failed. The third network request, because this page just refreshed, did work. It was a post. We got a 201 created. If we look at the response in the JSON trainer Carol token, our nice long token, authentication token. If I go to my console, I see the success message that I wanted. You know, we could check the database. It's not the end of the world because we've been manually checking, basically manually testing as we go, as we implemented all this other stuff. We actually have a really high degree of confidence now that everything on the back end did its job. But just for fun, in P-SQL, I just hit select all from trainer app trainer, and I see that Carol's been created, right? And if I also did select all from the auth token, there is now a new auth token in there, 641 BE, blah, blah, blah. And that is indeed the token that we get. So this is awesome. We are almost home. Before I kind of show the last couple pieces to really make this work so we can use the token with all of our other requests, what questions do folks have and what things would it be good to go over? Is everyone feeling pretty good about this? Okay, cool. So the last bit of work that we have to do is we have this token, but remember, we need to use it on every single request, right? If I'm going to go and just as a reminder, let's open up, actually put it in a markdown file. I do a preview of this markdown file. So this is the thing I had earlier. This is what we just did, this sign up flow. And can everyone see this image okay? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, I've only got like 3 or 4 people in my Zoom grid right now because it's off to the side. We just did this sign up flow right here. We created an account. Django did all the stuff that we've walked through, the abstract user awesomeness, and we got our token. We're not going to see signing in. We would have to make a login page. It would do something very, very, very similar. Really, the only thing that changes right here, in fact, is the endpoint. Because if I go over to a JavaScript code, and let's go to not navbar, but register, it's the exact same stuff, right? We're going to need the email and the password. And we send the email and the password, and then we get back a token. The only difference is instead of sign up, we do login. Real world sign up flows are usually a little more complicated because you almost always want to do an email verification, though not always. But this is actually great. This is actually pretty easy. Like if you really wanted to get fancy, you could add another input field here where the user types the password twice, and we could, add a bit of component state. And before we do anything, we could be like, if password 1, does not equal password 2, like show an alert to the user, and voila, now we've just implemented the really nice type the password twice feature when signing up. But logging in is basically literally the same thing. Right now, all we have to do here, in fact, is change sign up to login. And maybe we'll do that at the end, because that would actually be good to see. So kind of jumping back to this diagram though. So we've covered registering or signing up and signing in. This is now the part that we're tackling next of using the token. We haven't like set authentication on our other API routes right now. So like that's why I can still see Pokemon in the app and it's not saying you need an auth token. But that's where we're going. And certainly like if we want to have our users change their email addresses, that needs to be on an authenticated route, right? So now on every request, I want to pass this auth token. No matter what it is. Once I've signed in, this is what I always want to do. So that's the last piece that we need to build here. And it's really straightforward. And we're actually going to use the browser's local storage. And so very briefly, we saw that there's more happening under the hood with browsers. There is cookies, all these cookies. There's in fact a whole tiny relational database that lives in the browser that you can use and store stuff in, and some applications do. And I always forget local storage versus session storage. And this is kind of the key bit right here. There's two ways to kind of store stuff more generally, right? We usually don't want to use the whole tiny SQLite database that's actually in modern browsers because that's too heavyweight. Session storage is cleared when the page session ends, when the user closes the tab. Local storage is not. So what you want to think about here is if I'm at the library and I sign in and we get the auth token and we put it in local storage, and then I close the browser, when someone else opens up that browser, that token is still there. And that's why tokens, like by default, have like expiration times and stuff like that for situations like that. Because if you put it in local storage, it'll be there later. Session storage is a bit more secure in that sense, but it's a little more annoying because you don't get the nice, I don't have to log in all the time. And there's not much here in local storage or session storage right now. And the browser restricts it so we can only access local or session storage like specific to the URL or the origin that we're working with. And you can see it's basically just a little key value store. Like I could do foo and bar in local storage. And now in the JavaScript console, I could do, what is it? Local storage. And it's giving me a nice preview of what's in there as a get item. Might not even need to get that fancy because it's just an object, but we can do get item. So this stuff will persist. It should, at least. And indeed, it is still there. Right, so this is actually a pretty good place to put our token. And let me just pause and see if folks have questions about local storage. Cool. So again, we get to leverage the browser, which is awesome. And we're just going to do local storage set item token. And it's that easy. After this, we probably want to navigate to the homepage. That's a normal part of a sign up login flow once you click sign up, I don't want to stare at like the, the two sign up fields. So this is where I probably do want to use React routers, use navigate. And good, I wasn't quite sure if I was importing it from the right spot, but it looks like I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't get these docs there. So right here, let's call it. Right, we're going to call the use navigate hook so we can get this nice navigate function that we can then use to basically, it's not really a redirect, but go to homepage after successful sign up. And we probably should store the trainer email somewhere. Where we put that is a little bit up to us, and it's going to depend a bit on the rest of our app, because that's probably useful to have. It wouldn't be the worst idea to put it in local storage. We can definitely put it in React component state. We probably just would want to do that at the top level of the whole React app, because like I don't want to necessarily have it like going in different places. So I know in the curriculum lesson there's a bit of set user state being used, and I think I may not have implemented that, or there's slightly different architecture. But that one is, at least for the moment, a little less critical. What we could do, let me actually take a quick look at our guide code from this lesson to see if there is something for set user, to make sure I'm just not missing anything important. Yeah, we can come back to that one when we need it. We'll figure out where to put it. For the moment, it's less critical. Put email and local storage in top level component state, so the rest of the app can use it. It's also a good use case for React context if we wanted to go down that road. But there we go. We've got local storage in set item, which is awesome. And I think I covered kind of most of what we want to know about local storage. Just to recap, stuff stays in local storage even after we close the browser entirely. It's really simple key value pairs. There is a storage limit, but if you're putting like megabytes of stuff in local storage, that's a sign that you want to like change how you're doing architecting things. The term here is single origin policy. With origin, think host name, domain name. Like, the JavaScript from Facebook's React app can't go grab stuff in local storage from Google Maps, right? Like myapp.com can't go look at the stuff in local storage from yourapp.com. The browser enforces that. Nothing in local storage automatically expires, so we have to manage token expiration server side. There's some consideration here that local storage is synchronous, meaning like our JavaScript code will wait. But again, if we're doing tons of local storage work, that is a bit of a red flag. In essence, what we're doing now is a perfect example of how to use local storage for little key value stuff. And just to give like a preview, the sign up flow is pretty much the same here. I do think we want to add one bit more so that we can be using this authorization token. Right, that's probably the one bit to add next, in fact. And we want to do this not just when we log in, but also when we sign up. Since we already have the token, we might as well. So in fact, I'm just gonna put these side by side because I am going to use this as some guide code, but I generally don't like copying and pasting guide code. API, defaults, headers, common headers, authorization, and we make a little template string here, token. And just for sanity, I'm going to put that before the local storage, because while this shouldn't fail, it would be weird if we put the token in local storage, but then this API defaults headers thing broke. Right, so now every time we sign up, we immediately grab the token and put it in there, and as long as we don't like refresh the page, we're good to go. And we could add this to the beginning of the app as well to check for a token, which would be a cool feature. And we're also going to want to do this on login. So the login flow is really similar, and I can implement that. I think it might be interesting to see log out since we're already logged in. Maybe I'll implement that first, but I just want to check in with folks, because I want to make sure that people have enough work time and see how everyone's doing and how everyone's feeling about this.
What was the use effect for?
Oh, yeah, the use effect was for sign up. Thank you so much for reminding me of that. Let's modify this to make this real. I was sort of forcing this behavior. What we want to have happen is I click on the input button for submit, and then that calls our sign up function. So we don't need a use effect here at all. So let's get rid of that. We're going to want prevent default back. Let's get rid of this use state stuff. That was just me putting there for prototyping and debugging. Now, if I do a hard refresh, I should be able to register as yet another user. I think David is after Carol. And let's just do YYY333 just to have it be something different. And that was unexpected. So this is an easy fix. No routes match location home. So I almost definitely put the home, the slash in the home at the wrong spot. Right, and if I take a quick look at my router, I probably don't even need home at all. I can just put our base path. So let's try this. And by the way, David got created. Indeed, we've got David's token. Let's try this again. So we're creating lots of people and lots of tokens. And that's where the flows for this stuff does start to get a little interesting. What the normal thing to do is like the first thing you do when the app starts is you check for the token, and if it's there, we don't need to show people the register page at all. And then that way, like, you know, the user can't try to register and create an account while they're already logged in. And now our redirect to the homepage works great. Edwin was created and this token was added. which is awesome. And in fact, we can go ahead and we might as well, right now, just go ahead and let's go to our top level React code. I think we would want to take a look at, yep, we've got app.jsx and we've got all this stuff here with the nav bar. And I think I am just going to add this in right up here. Because this seems like a good spot to add a couple things. I'm going to import our API wrapper. And we're going to get auth token if exists. If local storage. And I want to do a quick JavaScript test, actually. If I go to the console, I'm going to do local storage get item. Excuse me. Local storage get item for something that definitely doesn't exist. So I want to see if this throws an error or returns null. So I'll have to handle it differently in the JavaScript depending on that. And that returns null, which is perfect because I can just use my normal truthy, falsy, Boolean stuff. Right. So let's do if local storage get item token. And in fact, on this register page, I am just gonna set the email here as well. We might as well. And I'm just gonna call it email. And we'll have it be we'll pass in the trainer email there. So this does add a little bit extra work because I have to keep track of two things in local storage, but it's nice to have these together. And every time this React app starts, we're going to do this, right? If local storage get item token, and let's just do that. It would be a problem if these got out of sync, but let's assume they never will. And do it that way. And I will have to do no, we can just do it with the API right here. I'll worry about component state later. The main thing I want to do is exactly what I did here. Here. Tell Axios to use auth token if it exists. And rather than have multiple lines of local storage, blah, 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 let's just do const token equals that. And now we can simplify this a bit. And now we should always be having and using that auth token. And I think maybe what I'll do is I'll just add a little console log and say Axios request authorization header set to, and let's make this a template string, template literal. And we'll just put this right in here. And now, every time the React page goes, I get a little console log, and that'll help me see that things are working as they should. So if I go over here and I clear all this stuff, and let's just close this entirely. In fact, let's go a step further. And open an incognito window because that clears a lot of cache stuff. And let's do localhost 5173. And it doesn't appear to be there. Maybe in fact, because I did an incognito window. Let's see what happens here. There we go. So the incognito window clears a lot of stuff, and it might clear local storage entirely. But we can see from closing and opening a new tab that the first thing that happens, I haven't clicked on any of my pages. React Router hasn't done anything. As soon as app.jsx starts up, we're checking local storage. If there's a token, we're grabbing it, which is awesome. And now we're set to use it, which is great. And there are like, we could do the same thing for email and kind of put that as top level component state. It gets a little trickier to pass it into the different pages because we're using like Outlet and React Router. So I'm not going to worry about that now. And we can use local storage anywhere. So we can grab that email whenever or wherever we want. And in fact, I think what I might just do is what we can do is we can have the nav bar. We could pass something into the nav bar. We could add a little message. Like there are a lot of ways that we could modify our code, you know, is logged in. Basically, we could have the nav bar not show the register page and show the user's email if we wanted, which is a nifty little feature. And that's also how we avoid someone who's already logged in, just logging in multiple times. So the logout behavior is not that different. The sign up page is not that different. And we can definitely look at those as well. It might be good to look at some user authentication workflows though. Like we can update the nav bar and we could add a logout button there. We could use our information route that we set. And I think I could use a little feedback because it is 2:40 Central. And I know that folks also want time to write code. Let me actually just pause recording here so we can figure out